The tarmac at Ben Gurion Airport was awash in tears and embraces as 6 figures, frail but unbroken, emerged from the aircraft. Romy Gonen, Emily Damari, Doron Steinbrecher, Keith Siegel, Yarden Bibas, and Ofer Calderon, their faces etched with the ordeal of 470 days in captivity, had finally returned home. Their release, secured through a complex prisoner exchange with Hamas, marked another chapter in the ongoing saga of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. These 6 individuals, kidnapped from music festivals and kibbutzim, had become symbols of the human cost of a conflict that seems to know no end. Their release, while a cause for celebration, does little to mask the deep scars left by the recent round of violence. The joy of their return is tempered by the knowledge that scores of families still await the return of loved ones, some still held captive, others lost forever in the rubble of war. Gonen, a young musician, had been snatched from a crowd at the Nova Music Festival, her dreams of a career in music brutally interrupted. Steinbrecher and Damari, a young couple building a life together in the Kfar Aza kibbutz, were torn apart from their families, their future uncertain. Their stories, each unique and heartbreaking, serve as a stark reminder of the human toll exacted by this seemingly intractable conflict. The release of Keith Siegel, an American-Israeli who had spent decades building a life in his adopted homeland, added another layer of complexity to the situation. His case, like that of other dual nationals held captive, highlighted the international dimension of the conflict and the delicate diplomatic dance required to secure the release of hostages. The road to freedom for these 6 individuals was paved with difficult compromises. In exchange for their release, Israel agreed to free 183 Palestinian prisoners, 18 of whom were serving life sentences for their roles in attacks against Israeli targets. This latest exchange, brokered by Egyptian and Qatari intermediaries, followed a pattern established in previous weeks, with Israel releasing a total of 383 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for the return of 19 hostages. The deal, while welcomed by the families of those freed, has ignited fierce debate within Israel. Critics, particularly from the right wing, argue that such exchanges only embolden Hamas and incentivize future kidnappings. They point to the release of prisoners with blood on their hands as a betrayal of the victims of terrorism and a dangerous concession that undermines Israel's security. Supporters of the deal, however, argue that Israel has a moral obligation to bring its citizens home, regardless of the price. They contend that the release of prisoners, many of whom have already served lengthy sentences, is a necessary evil to secure the freedom of those held captive. The emotional toll on the families and the nation, they argue, far outweighs the risks associated with releasing these prisoners. The debate over prisoner exchanges cuts to the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, highlighting the deep divisions within Israeli society and the agonizing choices faced by its leaders. It is a debate that is likely to continue long after the current ceasefire fades into memory, a stark reminder of the complex moral and political calculus that defines this intractable conflict. The release of the hostages came amidst a fragile ceasefire, brokered by Egypt after weeks of intense fighting that left thousands dead on both sides. The truce, which came into effect on January 19, 2025, has brought a welcome respite from the violence, allowing for the flow of humanitarian aid into the beleaguered Gaza Strip. As part of the ceasefire agreement, Egypt has opened its border with Gaza, allowing for the evacuation of critically ill patients and the delivery of essential supplies. International aid organizations, including the Red Cross and the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, have been working tirelessly to provide medical care, food, and shelter to the displaced population. The ceasefire, however, remains precarious. Both sides have accused each other of violating the terms of the agreement, and the underlying issues that sparked the latest round of fighting remain unresolved. The risk of a renewed outbreak of violence is high, particularly given the deep mistrust between the two sides and the volatile political climate in the region. The international community, led by the United States and the European Union, has welcomed the ceasefire and called on both sides to show restraint. However, concrete steps to address the root causes of the conflict, including the Israeli blockade of Gaza and the Palestinian Authority's internal divisions, remain elusive. The release of the hostages and the fragile ceasefire offer a glimmer of hope in a conflict that has caused immeasurable suffering. Yet the road to a lasting peace remains long and arduous. The underlying issues that have fueled this conflict for decades, land, security, identity, and justice, remain unresolved. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza, exacerbated by the recent fighting, demands urgent attention. With over 47,000 dead and millions displaced, the need for food, water, shelter, and medical care is dire. The international community must step up its efforts to provide humanitarian assistance and support the reconstruction of Gaza. Ultimately, a lasting solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict requires a political settlement that addresses the legitimate aspirations of both sides. This will require courageous leadership, painful compromises, and a willingness to break free from the cycle of violence and recrimination that has defined this conflict for far too long. Until then, the people of Israel and Palestine will continue to pay the price of this intractable conflict, their lives held hostage to a seemingly endless cycle of violence and despair.